riding bikes has always been a huge part of my life. And when I talk with my students about the freedom that it can offer them, they normally inform me that their bikes are broken, that they got a flat tire or their chain keeps falling off, so they never ride their bike. Well, I always teach my students the basic parts of a bike and how to fix them, and that's what this video is all about. So stick around and then check out the playlist that gives you even more information. Hello. So something I love to teach my students about are bikes. I always loved riding bikes when I was younger, and I still love riding bikes. I ride 12 miles to work. I don't know, maybe a quarter of the time. 12 miles there, 12 miles back. Really, really good exercise, and it's a great form of cheap transportation. The problem is a lot of my students have broken bikes, and maybe you have a broken bike, and they're actually really, really, really easy to fix. So I'm going to show you how to do it. So let's check it out. So here's my presentation all about bikes. So I'll be talking about, first of all, what is a bike? A bike is short for bicycle. You probably knew that. Bi meaning two. So cycle, something that happens over and over. So two wheels, right? They go around and around. A tricycle has three wheels and a unicycle has one. Never ridden a tricycle. I guess I did as a kid. But the newer ones, there are some big recumbent bikes. You lean back and you can ride on those. Those look pretty cool. I guess they're not that good. All right, so there are many, many different types of bikes. The main three would be a BMX. That is a single gear. What that means is you can't shift gears. It has one cog in the front, one cog in the rear. I believe all BMX bikes have that. You've got the smaller tires. I'm not sure the size of those tires, 20s? I don't know. I'm not an expert in bikes, but I do know how they work, and I know how to fix them and get them continue going. This is a BMX. A lot of people have BMX bikes. They're not very good for long distances unless you have the right gear ratio put in. So if you change out these gears to go longer distances, it might be good. Moving up, you could do a road bike. Road bikes are really, really good on the road and for longer distances. You have these drop handlebars that really help you to streamline yourself so there's less wind blowing on you. They have the skinnier tires that can sometimes lead to less rolling resistance. So while you're going down the road, you'll feel less friction. It'll be a little bit easier for you to go. I've seen wider tires that have about the same amount of rolling friction though. So road bikes are nice because a lot of times they're lightweight, all right? And they're really good for off-road. I actually have a mixture of a road bike and a mountain bike. It's called a gravel bike or a cyclocross bike. And I know those are different, but we're just talking about the basics here. And that I can ride off on the road, really long distances, but I can also ride it off-road almost as well as a mountain bike. It just doesn't have any suspension, so no shocks in it. A mountain bike, now this is a hardtail. There is no suspension. There's no shock in the back. It's going to have wider tires than the road bike. It's going to have multiple gears. So on this one, it might have 7 gears in the rear, 3 gears in the front. The road bike might have 7 in the rear and 2 in the front. You could set it up however you want. There are also some road bikes that are called fixed gears. There are some that only have 1 gear in the front and 1 gear in the rear. There are cruiser bikes. There are recumbent bikes. But these are the major types of bikes that you will see: BMX, road, and mountain. Mountain bikes are really, really good if you're going down hills, if you're riding trails through, you're making a lot of turns. If you're going straight for a long distance, road bikes are typically more beneficial. And then BMX would be like a skate park type stuff. Awesome. All right. There are a lot of other things we could cover on that, but I want you to know just the basics. If you want to look up more types of bikes, go for it. I will cover the most common issues that I hear about my students have. I'll be talking about how to change a flat tire, how to fix it. A lot of my students say they have bikes, but they have a flat tire, and so they stop riding it. Well, you can fix it. It's not that hard. A lot of people have their chain falling off, and they think the bike's broken. It's not. It's not typically broken. You can easily fix it just by adjusting it, and I'll talk about that. And then brakes not working right, I'll talk about how that goes. So to first begin, I want to talk about, I guess not to begin, but to continue, I want to talk about these parts of the bike. Now, there are other parts of the bike. There definitely are. But these are the major ones that I find most people need to know about in order to keep their bike running for years and years. My bike, I've had it for probably 6 years now. It should work another 30 years. All right. As long as we keep it up, replace the parts as they wear out, it should be good. So first, wheels, spokes, and tires. So the wheel, a lot of times when people talk about tires or wheels or anything like that, they're using it interchangeably. They're just talking about the big round thing on the bikes. To be specific, the wheel is this metal rim. So it's this portion of it. So if we have a dented wheel, that means this is dented. The spokes are these metal wires. And you actually need to adjust these spokes. If you go around and you sort of play it like a guitar, it'll make a noise. If you hear one that sort of makes a dull noise, you have to actually tighten that a little bit so it doesn't get too loose and cause issues. The way you tighten it is by twisting this. They have a special tool for it. In a pinch, you could use some pliers, though. Look it up, right? If you have a bent rim, so as it's going around, you see it going back and forth, you can actually adjust the tightness on these spokes, and it can fix some of those bends in the rim. Look up a video on that, though. Don't just go based off of the little bit I said. There are a lot of great tutorials, and I'll include them in the playlist that this video is on. The last thing to go over is the tire. That's the rubber part. It could be made out of Kevlar. It could have some plastics. It could, whatever it is, it's this part that's not metal. And normally it's going to have information about it, like the size of it. And one of the most important, which isn't on this, it will tell you the PSI. All right. Now, if you're, I guess other parts of the world use bar, it'll say the PSI or bar. That is the pressure per square inch. So when you're using your bike pump, you don't just put your thumb on it and push. What you do is you look for the number on the sidewall of your tire, and then you pump it up to that pressure. The reason why you want to do that is if you pump it too much, it could pop it. It's also going to change the ability to ride on it. You'll lose traction. Also, if it's too low, you'll get punctures. So if you keep getting flat tires, it's probably because you don't have enough air in your tires. It's a really good way to get flat tires, or you're just riding in awful places with a lot of glass or whatever. So check that number and fill it up, and I'll touch on that again. Next, inner tubes and fixing flats. A lot of my students run into this and they say, my bike's broken. Well, the bike's not broken. Bikes get flat tires. Cars get flat tires. Motorcycles get flat tires. Everything with a tire pretty much gets flat once in a while, and you can fix it. Inside of the rim, inside the tire, there is a rubber inner tube. It's like a balloon. And that balloon, if it gets a hole poked in it, maybe from a thorn coming through or a nail, or you hit a bump too hard, you hit a curb and you pop it, now you need to fix that inner tube. Now, a lot of the times you can pull that out. You would have to use tire irons. Some people use screwdrivers. I wouldn't do that. That really, really ruins it. I'll put in the playlist how to use tire irons. These are my favorite. They're metal. I brought the Kenway ones. I don't think it matters the brand. Just get a good rated one. The metal ones are great. I've used the plastic ones, and they worked really well on a lot of my tires. The problem is I had tires with a metal wire around them, and the plastic just broke. So having these metal things, tire irons are great. They're only about this big. I carry 3 of them with me in a backpack or in a bag connected to my bag, and I have it at all times, as well as some sort of air source. So maybe a bike pump or a CO2 canister that connects to it. So you pull out the inner tube, you find the hole, you can patch that hole using a patch kit, and I'll put things in the playlist showing you how to do it. And that's how you fix a flat tire. It's not hard. It's a really good thing to have the skill to be able to do, especially if you're going on longer bike rides. Moving on, the bike stem, that's this piece right here, and handlebars. A lot of my students will say, yeah, my handlebars keep moving to the side and they don't line up with my wheel. Well, the reason why is your fork here, there's a piece of metal that comes up here, and then the stem clamps onto it. If you don't have this clamp tight enough, so these screws, for the most part, they're going to be right on the side here. If they're not tight enough, your handlebars just sort of spin around it, and then your tire won't line up with your handlebars. So the way to fix it would be loosen it up, straighten them again, and then tighten these to, normally the specifications are written on there, but tighten them a good amount. Don't break the screws, but tighten them a good amount. If you do break the screws, you can always buy a new stem. They're like $10 or $15. And then you want to keep this tightened to the specifications that it says on it. basically tighten it, but don't tighten it where you're really where it feels like you're going to break it. If your handlebars keep moving back and forth or up and down, you need to tighten the screws up here. And typically those are just Allen wrenches. And so very nice, cheap wrenches. Remember, you should have a reflector on the front. I'm going to talk about the shifters in just a little bit, okay? So that's your stem and handlebars. There are different types of handlebars. I think I might touch on that. We'll see. But there's the flat style handlebars. There are the drop handlebars, like road bikes. There are the big, like almost ape hanger, really tall ones. There are a lot of different styles. All right, there's quick release. Now I have these on both of my tires, my seat, and I believe that's it. A lot of the times my students will say, yeah, they don't work anymore. They don't tighten anything. Well, the thing is, this is just a screw. And what this does is it sort of tightens that screw. Sometimes, though, this is a nut. This nut will get loose. And when you go to tighten this, it doesn't really tighten much because the screw isn't tight enough. All you have to do is pull that out so it gets loose, tighten this, and then push this back down. It should be a decently firm fitting. That's on the wheels as well as anywhere else you find it. I know on my son's Strider bike, he also has it on his the handlebars. You're probably used to it also on scooters, so maybe you're used to that one. So like Razor scooters and types stuff like that. Moving on, brakes. This is a huge thing. A lot of people, they say their brakes don't work on their bikes. One type of brake I did not include in here is the type where you push your bike pedal backwards. I can try to get a good video on that. These are the main different types. They're the caliper. These are definitely the old style. On cheaper bikes, nothing wrong with them. They work great, especially if you're riding just normal trails or on the road and you're not getting very muddy. These are brake pads. Those brake pads can be replaced. They're not very expensive. All you do is remove these nuts and put the new one on. A lot of the times what I end up seeing is they're adjusted wrong. So one side rubs and the other doesn't. Normally there are some screws that you can adjust the spring tension that makes it pull to the other side. So I'll try to find the video on that in the playlist so you can check that out. Then moving on, we have cantilever. This is sort of V-brakes and cantilevers are the sort of the upgrades to these calipers. This one, I don't want to say it perfectly aligns itself, but it aligns itself a lot better. And I tend not to have to deal with so many upkeep issues of them not maybe sticking. These tend to rust or stick. This doesn't do it as much. Same with these. The nice thing about newer brakes, these older brakes, in order to take the tire off, if it doesn't fit between the brake pads, you have to actually loosen this, and then you'd have to reconnect your brake cable. The nice thing about the new brakes is you can, and it's on the other side, you can just pull it out. So a lot of the times like this one, you'd squeeze this together and then this pops out, and then you'd be able to take your tire out, right? If you're on the trail and you get a flat tire, it's a little bit more work to get this tire off to fix that flat tire. In this case, these brakes just sort of disconnect, which is nice. Now they don't disconnect fully from the bike, they come apart away from the tire. Then the newest style, which is one of the nicest, are disc brakes. The way they work is they have this disc and a caliper, and there are little brake pads, and inside of there, when you pull the brake, it just squeezes that caliper. So pretend this is the caliper. This is the disc. The caliper squeezes to stop you. The really nice thing about this is you can, if you're getting in really muddy areas where maybe the tires are covered in mud and the brakes are covered in mud, these brakes aren't going to work well. In order to get this covered in mud, you'd have to be very deep in the mud. So it really works well in those conditions where it's going to be really gross. Also, some nicer bikes have a brake fluid instead of a brake cable that runs to these disc brakes, making it very easy to pull that brake. And even though mine, on my mountain bike, I have cable disc brakes, and they're so much easier to squeeze than these brakes. So these can be much more effective. If you're having issues with sounds or anything like that, I'll find some really good videos and continue to add them to the playlist that'll help you better understand on how to adjust those brakes. Moving on, we have the chain and derailleur. So if you have different gears on your bike, you do have derailleurs. These are derailleurs. And what they do is when you shift gears, which I'll talk about in a minute, they move the chain to a different gear. All right. Normally they work really well. The problem is if you bought it from a place like Target or Walmart and not a normal bike shop, uh, your bike is probably pretty decent, but it hasn't been set up correctly. And so what you need to do is you need to adjust your derailleurs so they actually shift correctly. Those of you that have your chain continually falling off or once in a while falling off, it's because the derailleur is set wrong. Now, if you have a single gear bike, where there's one gear in the front, one gear in the rear, single speed bike, and your chain is falling off, what you need to do is loosen that rear tire, yank it back really hard, and tighten it, and that'll make your chain a lot tighter. Those of you that are losing your chain, in these cases, typically you just need to adjust your derailleur. So check the playlist for that. Sometimes these gears will wear out. You can replace them, but most of the time that's not it. Sometimes your chain wears out. You should be keeping it clean. This is really rusty. You should be oiling it, not with WD-40, with maybe a dry lubricant, something like a graphite. You don't want WD-40. The reason why is it really, a lot of dust sticks to it, and then your chain gets covered in dust and nastiness, and it really leads to premature wear of that chain as well as your gears, and it's just nasty and gross, and you're touching your chain and it's nasty. My chain looks almost brand new, and like I said, it's probably actually like 6 or 7 years old. I was wrong on the age. So I keep it clean and I keep it lubricated, but with a dry lubricant, because I don't want anything sticking to it. All right, so keep it clean, really important. The next part, we have shifters, barrel nuts, and brake levers. So we have 3 different main types of shifters. There are other types, but there's the thumb shifter where you push one way to shift up, and there's another lever and you press it to shift down. This one is a twist grip, so you just twist this handle, sort of like the throttle on a motorcycle, and it will shift gears. And then this is an integrated shifter. You actually push the brake lever to the side, and then this little thing to the side, and it'll shift up and down. Along with that, you have barrel nuts. They are these little adjusters. I know that's a little hard to see, but there are adjusters next to your shifters as well as your brakes, and you can fine tune them. That will be covered in the brake video in the playlist, as well as the adjusting your derailleurs. So that'll be all covered, but those are really nice ways to sort of fine tune your brakes and your shifting. But these are the main shifters, and then there are brake levers. This doesn't have a brake. I'd imagine maybe there's a brake on the other side, or maybe it's one of the foot brakes. You know, you push the pedal backwards. These brakes you squeeze here, and then some older bikes actually have shifters on this tube here, this red tube. They have shifters there. All right, moving on. Seat post. The reason why I bring this up, number one, a lot of times people have it adjusted to the incorrect height. What I've heard the best way to do it is go on your bike, put your heel on your pedal. Your legs should be straight. Then you know you're at the right height. So then when you put your foot on it like you're going to ride it normally, your knee is going to be bent a tiny bit. But the biggest reason why I bring up seat post is you should be removing your seat once or twice a year. I like to do it every 6 months or so. At the beginning of riding season, I'll take it out, clean it off, put it back in, and then at the end of riding season. The reason why is sometimes what can happen is it can fuse itself in there, and then you're not getting it out very easily. And sometimes it's just pretty much permanently stuck in there. So you want to keep that being able to move, because depending on the type of riding, you might want to lower your seat. Maybe I'm doing some. I take my mountain bike out, and I'm going to have to jump up on a log or something. I'd like my seat a little bit lower so I have a little more clearance. If I'm doing a long ride, I'd like it a little bit higher. So you want to be able to adjust that seat. So definitely, take it out, clean it off, maybe put some a tiny bit of lubricant in there. Just wipe it down, wipe it off, maybe some oil so it doesn't rust, and then put it back down. Not a lot of oil. You don't want it sliding all the time where you can't tighten it. I think this is the last part I was talking about, is the frame. This is the main part of your bike, and it can be made out of a bunch of different things. It can be steel, aluminum, carbon fiber. I've seen some made out of bamboo and other materials. The big thing here is your frame. If it's steel, you have to worry a little bit about rust. They do last a long time, but I put like a little bit of oil on the inside of the tubes just to sort of hold off that rust, because I want my frame to last a long time. Some bikes cost a lot of money, right? If it's aluminum, you don't really have much to worry about. You do want to check it for cracks. Check any bike for your welds being bad. If there's a bad weld, you want to stop riding that bike, because you definitely don't want to be riding down the road and it break on you. That could be very dangerous. Other than that, look up the specific frame of your bike and see what you need to do to keep it up. But honestly, if it's a steel or aluminum frame, you don't have much to worry about. Just ride it. If you see rust, check it out, see how bad it is. If it's rusting through, you'd want to get a new frame, or at least weld it or fix it somehow. But normally that doesn't happen. All right. This fork, the cool thing about forks is you can actually replace them pretty easily. You remove your stem and a couple things up here, and they fall out, and you can put a new one in. So if you wanted to add a new suspension fork or whatever, or maybe this fork bent, you could put a new one in, which is nice. You can also put new cranks in and all that stuff. You could add gears even to some of your tires. Very, very customizable bikes. All right. Bike fit is a very, very important thing. If it hurts you, if your hands are going numb while you're riding, or your back hurts, your neck hurts, your legs are overly tired, you might just be out of shape. But a lot of times fitting yourself to the bike is really important. So I'm going to add a video on bike fit in the playlist. It's some very easy things you can do to make sure your bike is adjusted correctly so you can get the best ride out of it. Right now, my road bike, I noticed that the bike stem, the stem on the handlebars is too long, so I'm buying a shorter one, and then it'll make a little bit more comfortable ride. Maybe it's, I don't know, as I get older or something, but my back started hurting, and so I realized if I got a shorter stem, it would put me into a better position. And actually, it would be what a bike shop would suggest anyway. So bike fits are good. Every time you go riding, you should be doing the ABCs. This is checking air. Check the tire pressure. Check the sidewall of your tire. Make sure it's the right pressure. If it's not the right pressure, you shouldn't be riding it, okay? Look at the condition of the tires. If they're worn down, especially if you're seeing like metal or anything coming through it, you want to get new tires. And check the pressure of the quick release. There's nothing like riding your bike, doing a jump, and the front wheel falling off, right? That's very dangerous, and you can fix that just making sure they're tight. You should also bring a pump and a patch kit with you. I know that sounds annoying, and if you're just riding around your neighborhood, maybe you don't need that. But I've, on my way to work, I've gotten a flat, and I was very, very happy to have that patch kit. So very important. Other thing, you want to look at the brakes. Are the brake pads wearing? Are they really low? You want your bike to be able to stop, right? If you were riding your bike and the brakes didn't work anymore, that would be a bad thing. Do they engage correctly? When you squeeze it, do they actually stop? Are they making noises? That means it's not adjusted correctly, possibly. So watch those videos that I'm putting in the playlist, and you definitely want to be making sure that they're adjusted correctly. And then check your chain, clean and lubricate it. No WD-40, right? That's all sticky and nasty. One of the best ways you can clean it is just get a brush, right? Get a brush, maybe get some degreaser, get a brush and clean an old toothbrush, and then a rag, and wipe it down. Then you add your new lubricant onto it. So hopefully that gave you the basics. I am going to follow up, I think, with a video talking about how you can find the best bike trails near you. And yeah, so get out there and ride. It's a beautiful day today, so I might actually get out there and ride too. Have a great day, everybody.